For Gary Gotlieb, a barrister who's former president of the Auckland District Law Society and of the New Zealand Criminal Bar Association, the broader issue raised by this case is that compensation is determined by cabinet guidelines. In short, to varying degrees, the process is politicised from the outset. Gary Gotlieb has fought for compensation for people wrongly convicted and imprisoned, and for people held in jail for long periods on remand when the charges were then dropped. And what they get and whether they get it is determined by a formula decided in 2001, which then goes to the minister, who then makes a recommendation to cabinet.
They are open to being politicised. That's just the nature of it. And that's why I think we need to go back and rethink about the way we have cabinet guidelines for compensation. It just seems to me that it's quite unfair. And I was mentioning to you the case about the young person who was 17 years of age, was locked up for a year and a day, never got to trial, and I wasn't a lawyer at that time, and they realised they had the wrong person just before the trial was about to start, and he was walked out of prison, and they said, "Oh, sorry." They came to me for compensation. They went to the cabinet guidelines. No. The person, the justice, with great glee said, "You have to have been convicted and gone to prison. You can't be on remand. You don't get a cent." Now, that is a nonsense, and I think members of the public would think that is a nonsense. We need to relook at the cabinet guidelines, so they can't be politicised.
Is this a case where they have been politicised? Has this been an explicitly, overtly, demonstrably political process?
There's certainly a strong ring of that seems to be coming through, yeah.
So how was that avoided in future?
Well, I think you probably need to set criteria out that if you are acquitted of a matter that you've been to prison, like there's a retrial, the standard of having to prove your innocence seems to me to be a very high threshold to get around if you have someone who wants to say, "I'm not satisfied by that." Now, in the Taina Pora case, the retired judge there had no doubt that he was innocent, came out very strongly on that and was quite critical of whole lots of aspects of it. But that didn't get him any more money. So I just like to know how people would feel after 21 years in jail, how you'd be happy with 2.5 million, and therefore the guidelines are just too light. It's just not right. And Taina has limited what he can buy with that money, bearing in mind what all the years, over 20 years after the event, what he can do with that money, and that's why they're arguing to get an interest factor.
It's fascinating, the response to the Bain case, isn't it? Because as Amy Adams herself said at her media conference, it is so polarised. And there are people, including the jury in Christchurch, who say that he did not do it. And there are other people who are much less persuaded of that. And there are people who, in fact, are on the record saying the jury got it wrong. Is that a balancing act that can ever be accommodated within the compensation equation?
Well, I think you have to say that if someone has been acquitted and had previously been inside, that should be the starting point for compensation.
So acquittal is the starting point. So over and above that, the idea that innocence must be proven, a much higher bar than simply being not guilty. Do you think that is the flaw here?
Yes, so that enables it to be politicised, and that's a very high standard. They're going back and rejudging it again on the paper trail, and the Queen's Counsel, or whoever it is, spends months and months reading it all and thoroughly looks at it. Now, I can tell you, I've done lots of cases, and you read the paperwork, and when it finally gets to trial, it's a different animal. And just reading words is quite different to actually having a hearing. But the reality is that's why you have to rely on it. If there's an acquittal, hey, the person's been wrongfully convicted in the past, therefore pay them some money.
Gary Gotlieb speaking to us earlier.